I'm reading this book by Erwin McManus. It's called The Genius of Jesus. One, I'm reading it because it was recommended to me. Two, because I find what Jesus was able to do so fascinating and how he did it. There's just a level of intention and authenticity and strategy that goes in how he built essentially the church. Chapter 2 is called The Prodigy, and basically he's talking about how Jesus was a prodigy and he was a child prodigy. We don't know very much about his life prior to him being 12, but at 12 we know that he's found in the temple. His parents are looking for him for like 3 days, and then they're like, "Why have you done this to us?" And then Jesus goes, "I don't know why you've been looking for me. You should know that I'm about my Father's business." Basically saying, hello, this is always who I've been. It should not be a surprise. So then he references other prodigies like Mozart or Picasso and people who are really iconic and legendary in their fields, and how usually they start off that way as children. Like, you can really see the genius that exists inside of them before they ever reach adolescence. Also in chapter 2, he references a study conducted by George Lynn and Beth Jarman. They did this work with NASA, and it was part of the Head Start program. They tested 1,600 kids between the ages of 3 to 5 who were already enrolled inside of the Head Start program. And then they retested the same children at 10 years of age and then again at 15. So this is a longitudinal study. The proportion of people who scored at the genius level when they were tested young was 98%. 98% of 3 to 5-year-olds tested at the genius level. That's mind-blowing. When they went to test these same children at 10 years old, only 30% of them were considered at the genius level. And then they tested them at 15-year-old, and guess what the percentage was? 12. 12% at 15 were at the genius level. So what happened between the age of 3 to 5 to 15? What happened in that 10 years? And the way that they tested for this genius level standard was they looked at a few different things. One is how they thought, like, could they think creatively? And for a lot of people that I work with, I think this is a really poignant study because so often we don't think that we're creative. We kind of get into this field of entrepreneurship, and entrepreneurship requires creativity. It requires a lot of creativity. I mean, imagine all the content you have to create, imagine all the messaging you have to put out, how you speak, how you run your business. It's not cookie cutter. Like, there's so many different ways of running a coaching business or running any business in general. But we often don't attribute creativity to that. Like, we don't think that we're creative. And so many people will rate, if I was in a room and I said, who in here thinks that they're creative? Less than 10% of that room is going to think that they're super creative. So for those of you who think, I'm not creative, I don't have a creative bone in my body, let me free you from that lie, because you were actually born creative, at least according to this study. And I just truly believe in my heart of hearts that that's how God designed us to be. Especially if you are to fulfill your purpose on this planet, creativity is going to be required, because I guarantee you that there's no cookie cutter way of achieving success. You're called to do one thing, your next door neighbor's called to do something else, I'm called to do something, somebody else watching this video is going to be called to do something different. But I think the way that we've learned how to live is sort of very systematic. We just go from like step 1, step 2, step 3. How we define what success looks like in this country is one linear way. And anything that deviates from that is often looked at as weird or impossible, or, oh no, you shouldn't do that. And if you're watching this, you are probably in a space where, number 1, you are trying to find your purpose. Number 2, you want to validate the purpose that you believe it to be. Or number 3, you're already sort of in the middle of it, but you just kind of want to make sure that you're doing it right. You're in a good place. This is a good conversation for all of us to have. And I think that we learn what that process is very early on. And so to save ourselves from embarrassment, or to save ourselves from judgment, or to save ourselves from failure, we just sort of fall in line and we lose a lot of that creativity. So for those of you who are in a space where you're like, I don't even know what my purpose is, I don't know what God is calling me to do. Number 1, I don't think that that's real. I think that is something that we tell ourselves because we are afraid to admit what it truly is. Because when we admit it, that means that we're going to be held accountable to it. And that means we have to do something, because otherwise we're just blatantly being disobedient. Number 2, if you really are in a struggle, then let's walk it back. Like, let's use the examples that he talks about in this chapter to address, how do you find that special area of genius zone? Like, if you were born a genius, how can we get back to that? How can we reclaim who we were always called to be? So one of the things that he talks about, obviously, like I said earlier, is he talks about it showing up when you were a child. So just for example, and I'll use myself, when I was young, I was really inquisitive. Like, I would ask 1,000 questions. I have video footage of this where I would just ask questions. I would ask my dad a whole bunch of questions. And somewhere around 6 or 7, he bought me a set of Encyclopedia Britannicas. I don't know if he bought me those Britannicas because he didn't know the answer, or he just got tired of me asking the question. So once he taught me how to research the answer to my questions, because the questions I would ask would be like, where does lightning come from? Why does thunder make sound? Like, it would be those kinds of questions, and, very scientific. And so when I started to ask questions after he had gotten me the encyclopedias, his favorite response was, go look it up. Again, I don't know, because I don't think he was trying to be rude or, dismissive. I think, number one, he didn't have the full answer to that, because I would keep asking. Like, I would ask until I was satisfied with the answer. And then number two, I think he was trying to teach me how to be self-sufficient in finding this information for myself. Now, my dad died when I was 7, but I will always say that this is one of the greatest gifts that he gave me, is the ability to research things. Because even to this day, I am a researcher, which is why when I'm reading a book and it references a NASA study, I'm like, well, let me go look up the NASA study. It's one of the reasons why I got a doctorate degree, is because I like the process of research and I'm good at it, quite frankly. Now, how does that translate into what I get to do with my life as a coach? Well, I think my approach as a coach is different, right? So I'm going to come from a variety of different disciplines, a whole bunch of information. It's not just going to be mine. I'm usually going to take a lot of research and a lot of data. When I created my signature program, called Platform, I did that based on the research that I'd conducted, the peer-reviewed research, the study that I'd conducted in my doctoral program, because I wanted to make sure that there was empirical evidence to proof of why this system was the best system for the kinds of clients that I was working with. To date, I don't know anybody else who has the same amount of empirical data in their coaching discipline as I do. I don't know anybody who has the published research in that discipline that I do. Now, all of that started when I was a child. It was something that my father saw in me and clearly helped me to cultivate and to grow it by doing what he knew how to do best. And then I just took that and I continued to sort of grow that even as I got older. So if you're in a conversation of purpose with yourself, I think one of the best things to do is sort of run it back to when you were a child. What are the things that you innately did that were just so easy for you? And the thing about looking back to when you were a child is that you'll see that not every child operates the same. Like, every child has their own level of genius. Mine happened to be research, in that age of 5 to 7. I could read really early. My brother, we grew up in the same household, but my brother's area of genius really was in athletics. Like, I played sports, but I was never going to be a professional athlete. He did. He went on to become a professional athlete. He still works in athletics now as a coach, because a different kind of coach than me, obviously, but he still coaches in the discipline of basketball because he sees things differently. Like, his ability to look at a court, look at plays, like, it's a different level of genius. And when you look at somebody like, let's say, LeBron James, who memorizes every single play in a basketball game and can tell it to you word by word, recollecting it from, years ago, and then somebody who's, let's say, a quantum physicist, and they're going to be able to talk to you about dark matter. I mean, these are levels of genius that most of us will never experience. The thing that allows them to do what they're doing is that they just sort of followed the path of that genius. They followed what was naturally what they were naturally good at. And I think we don't do that enough. So if you're looking for your purpose, or you're looking for your level of genius, and you're trying to figure out, okay, what is it? I think that's a good place to start. Go back to the time when you were 5, 6, 7 years old. What did you enjoy? What were things that you were really, really good at that other people were not? Even if you were judged for it, even if you were made fun of it, even if it wasn't something that everybody was doing, even if you tried to hide it, usually you can see snippets and you can see inklings. Now, obviously, your 5-year-old self is not going to be your 35-year-old self. Like, your 5-year-old self has a very limited worldview. Your 5-year-old self is very immature in the mind, so they're not going to have the purview that you have now at 30, 40, 50, even 60 years old. However, whatever age you are watching this, but I think you can start to see snippets, and then you start to put it together. Like, what are the things that I have always been good at? And then what are the skill sets that I have cultivated over the course of the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 decades, right? What are the things that I studied? What are the things that I learned along the way? What are some areas where I have been awarded, applauded, celebrated? And then if you can sort of converge those things, and a lot of the times I think for entrepreneurs, it happens kind of naturally. I think it happens naturally for professional athletes. I think it happens naturally for people in many different disciplines. But I can speak for myself is because usually, and for my clients too, usually what happens is they know that they're good at this. They know that in history past, these are things that they were very, very proficient in, but somehow they kind of went left because society told them they had to do that, or their family told them they had to do that, or there was an expectation of doing that came from somewhere else, and they didn't get the opportunity just to follow that passion. So number one, let me just tell you, it's not too late. I think sometimes we think, oh, I'm 30 years old, I'm 40 years old, I'm 50 years old. It's too late for me to live in my purpose. It's too late for me to follow my passion. Untrue. Do not believe that lie from the pits of the underground, because now might be the time. Like if you are questioning it now, if you're asking yourselves the questions now, God, what do you want me to do? What is my purpose? What is my area of genius? How can I use that to live the abundant life? If those are the questions that you're asking right now, then this is a good time to begin to explore it. This is a good time to go, oh, you know what? Yeah. Like this is a good time. Like I am still here. I'm alive. I can breathe. I have a sound mind. I can begin to fulfill some of those things that may have gotten lost in childhood. So that's number one. Number two, I would recommend having some patience. Patience with yourself on this journey, because while I do believe that inside of you, the truth lives there and has lived there all along, sometimes we have spent so much time burying it deep under layers and layers and layers of life that it's hidden so far that it's going to take us a little bit of time to uncover it. So as you're asking that question, give yourself the grace and the space to truly find the answer. Sometimes we ask ourselves that question. We're like, God, what is it that you want me to do? We're asking for vision. God doesn't give us the vision in like 2 weeks, and we're like, forget it, never mind, I quit. I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. When you know in your heart of hearts that there is in fact something deeper, there is something more that is available for you. You just have to allow yourself the time to move into the space where you are seeing the truth about who you truly are. And then lastly, I'll say that I have asked this question multiple times. I ask people, what do you feel called to do in this season? And the amount of I don't knows that I get, it's very interesting. And I'm simply a coach that does not believe that. I'm simply a coach that will not buy in to your professed ignorance. I just don't think that God creates us that way. I think that God is very clear God has no desire to hide your purpose from you. Like he's not playing keep away. He is not invested in your ignorance. He's not invested in your failure. He's not invested in you having a difficult time. As a matter of fact, he's very invested in giving you the abundant life. He's very invested in letting you know that he has a plan for your life to prosper in this world on this side of eternity. So having said that, when people give me the answer of, oh, I don't know what God wants me to do, the reason why I don't think that's true is because I do think that God writes eternity. I know God writes eternity on the hearts of men, but also you have seen glimpses of what you're supposed to do already in your life. Whether you were 4, 5, 6, 7, whether you were 10 years old, you've already seen glimpses of it. You've just forgotten yourself. You have allowed yourself to deviate from that path, and you've chosen a different one. Not that it's bad, not that God hasn't used where your life is now, not that God can't use what you're doing currently or what has been done in the past. I just want you to recognize that if it's time to pivot, if it's time to make a hard left because you've been going right for a really long time, then we just need to accept that. But most people don't want to admit what they're called to do because they're afraid. There's a lot of fear. There's a fear of, well, I've been an attorney for the last 25 years, and now, God, you want me to go be a missionary in Africa? I'm not saying that that's your calling, right? Or, well, I have been a teacher for the last 15 years, and now you want me to be an entrepreneur? Or I've run my business for the last 30 years, and now you want me to go and be a professor? Like there's a lot of nuance to where you are, what you've done, and what God's calling you to do now. And sometimes it is a hard pivot, sometimes. But I think the reason why we don't want to admit it to ourselves is because of that accountability piece. It's because we don't want to be held accountable to a truth that God is then going to be like, Hello, I told you what to do already. Here's what I know. God's not going to change his mind. Like, whatever you came on this planet to do, whatever you came on this planet to be, that's not going to change. Like, God doesn't go, you know what? You're right. You have been an astronaut for 45 years. You just keep being an astronaut. When really what he's called you to do is go be a preacher somewhere. Or, he's not going to say, you've been in human resources for the last 25 years. That's perfect. I really want you to be an author and a speaker, but you know what? You've done this long enough. You can keep going. That's not how it works. The thing that God has called you to do is always going to be the thing that God's called you to do. He's just waiting for you to say yes. So I'm going to leave you with the statement from chapter 2 from Erwin Raphael McManus. And he says, "We are born unique and original, but too many of us die tragically ordinary. We have confused growing up with giving up on our genius. Don't let that be you."